Ladies and gentlemen, in today's video, we're going to take a look at some insane reverse racism against white people that's happening in Australia. Let's jump straight into it. A hospital in Melbourne, Victoria has decided that if you walk into that hospital and you are an Aboriginal person, you are to be seen first, above everybody else. Now, is that racist? Well, yeah. Obviously, that's not a good thing. Surely we are not devolved enough as a society that we have returned to, well, serving people, particularly with healthcare, based on the colour of their skin. Maybe we have, but I don't think we should. Aussie Hospital orders staff to prioritise Aboriginal patients in emergency department. That headline right there is enough for you to sit back and go, what is happening in Melbourne? This state, Victoria, is the most woke state. It's the most progressive state. It's the most virtuous state. And you would hear that and think that that's a very good thing, but it's not. It's all based on nothing. These people don't actually care. They just want to be seen as doing the right thing. And that's when you find yourself doing things like this, being genuinely racist towards other people just to appear like you are some sort of left-leaning god. This proves once and for all, Victoria, the wokest state in Australia, has gone to the absolute virtue signaling dogs. Okay, we knew this back in 2020, 2021, when it was the most locked down state in the entire world. We know how the people, the politicians who lead this state, the premier of this state or governor, but depending on where you're from, these people think they are better than your average Australians. They think they are better than you or I, and they want to appear to be virtuous, like they're saving the world. They're not. They're making it worse. They're dividing people. This is a problem. In this state, this is where they're trying to bring back the voice referendum. What was the voice, you ask? Well, it was a referendum designed to change the constitution, to give Indigenous Australians a committee, basically, enshrined in the constitution, people who weren't elected, by the way, to have a say on laws and all that shit that have been passed that affect Aboriginal people. Now, you would say, now, from the outset, that sounds great, that sounds wonderful, and a lot of people thought like that. Unfortunately, there was no information about what powers they had, who was elected, who was going to elect them, etc., etc., etc. So they just went out with this blank vote and expected everyone to say yes. Well, they didn't. 60% of people didn't, in fact, but Victoria's going to do it anyway. Good on you guys. So what is actually happening in this Melbourne hospital? It's coming under fire after the staff have been directed to treat Indigenous patients over that of other Australians. Remember, we're talking about white people, Asian people, all different colours, all different ethnicities, but Aboriginal people are going to get treated first. Why? St Vincent's Hospital introduced a directive ordering staff to treat Indigenous patients within 30 minutes of arrival at the emergency room. Geez, that's a fucking, considering a lot of people there for like 6 or 7 hours, that's pretty good. Potentially prioritizing their treatment over others. Potentially or absolutely doing that. Obviously, these triage departments in emergency rooms are going to treat someone coming in with a heart attack first, regardless of their skin color. That is obvious. That's not changing. But if you've broken a leg or you've fucking broken your finger or you've got a real, one of your cuticles is ripped off, if you're an Indigenous person, if you have a different color skin or you have a different background to me, you're going to get seen before me based purely on that. And I think that's a bit fucking ridiculous, right? But ladies and gentlemen, before we go any further, this video is brought to you by the great people at Fume. No vapor, no nicotine, just flavor. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that delivers great taste without any harmful chemicals. Instead of inhaling vapor, you simply breathe in natural, food-grade ingredients. You satisfy the craving without the addiction. You replace the bad in the habit with something that's not harmful. It's great for fidgeting and the oral fixation. You're still doing the action, but you're not inhaling the terrible stuff. That's the benefit. It's sleek, portable, and designed to last. You can even personalize it. My go-to flavor is crisp mint. It's extra minty, and I do like that. Over 700,000 people have already made the switch to Fume as a part of their habit-changing journey. If you're ready to try it for yourself, now is the time, ladies and gentlemen. For a limited time only, if you order the Journey Pack using my code Butterfield, you will get a Fume topper, an awesome extra accessory to level up your experience. Click the link ladies and gentlemen, or head to tryfume.com/Butterfield. That's FUM for fume, or scan the QR code immediately. And now, ladies and gentlemen, back to the video. The policy has won endorsement from the Victorian Premier, Jacinta Allen. That's the lady who has absolutely no idea about fucking anything. She decided to introduce expensive machete bins to stop knife crime, which hasn't done a fucking thing. It's still a fucking shit fight down there. She said that it would help achieve better health outcomes for, quote, vulnerable groups. If you're an Aboriginal person listening to this, do you fucking hate being called vulnerable all the time? I think that would be very, very annoying. Indigenous activist and prominent Voice No campaigner Warren Mundine said that the treatment should be given based on the needs of the patient rather than the race. I think that's the most obvious statement of all time. Like, who the fuck doesn't agree with that? So the whole point of this policy is to help close the gap. There is a gap currently between the average age of death between Indigenous Australians and non-Indigenous Australians. Now, I don't know if that's non-Indigenous as in all different colours or just white people, but regardless, that is a problem. Now, a lot of the reasons for that are personal decisions. Some people who are Aboriginal make poor personal decisions, but there's also a whole hell of other issues that is happening out in particularly remote communities throughout Australia that we need to address. There are laws affecting these people. There is policy affecting these people that is probably still built on the back of racism, and that's not a good thing at all. So, should we be doing something about it? Yeah. Apparently this is all to do with poorer outcomes for Indigenous people when they go to hospitals. Now, they didn't really tell us why that happened. I had to actually look at the research. Now, the research, I think this is what they're referring to in the actual article itself and why, potentially why this directive was put in place. There's a peer-reviewed article called Characteristics of First Nations Patients Who Take Their Leave from an Inner City Emergency Department. This is between the years 2016 and 2020. So they analysed almost 6,500 presentations by First Nations adults during this 4-year period at a emergency department, St. Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne, which is the hospital in question in the article. I imagine that's what SVHM stands for. The key result was 13% of those First Nations patients took their own leave, meaning they left the hospital before being seen treatment or at risk compared to the nation's average. Now, I'm not going to tell you the nation's average yet. Remember, the average number is 13 for Indigenous patients who leave before being seen or leave even when they're still sick. Do you know what the average number is for Australians who are white or Asian or brown or whatever? It's 13. We're talking about a 3% gap. Now, don't you think there might be a better way to reduce that 3% gap? Which, honestly, 3% isn't that much. If it was 50%, I'd be like, holy shit, we need to do something now. But isn't there another way to help with that 3% gap for Indigenous Australians? And I also wanted to know, these people, what a horrible thing to say, but this is the whole thing, fucking breaking everything down to race. I don't like it. But these Aboriginal people, they live in inner city Melbourne, a very woke part of the world. Like, I don't think these particular Aboriginal people are dealing with the racism that perhaps other Aboriginal people deal with up in the Northern Territory, Alice Springs, out in the bush, whatever. Like, I don't think they are. I think a lot of these people also present as white. So maybe this research, is this epidemiological research? I imagine it is. Maybe this research is flawed. And perhaps breaking everything down to the color of one's skin or who your grandmother was probably isn't the best way to work out the way to save people's lives or at least treat the sick. The research went on to recommend that Aboriginal people were to receive a strategic Category 3 minimum evaluation as soon as they walk into a emergency department for triage. So they walk in and, if you've got a fucking sore finger, you get Category 1, I guess, and Category 5 is the worst. I'm not sure which way is which, but, you're not going to get seen for 6 weeks. Sit down there, dickhead. But if you're an Aboriginal person, you walk in, you're immediately Category 3 and you have to be seen within 30 minutes. Regardless if you've got a fucking, a sore toe, a headache, or you're having a heart attack. But do we really think that these Indigenous people were not being seen because of the color of their skin? Like, I think that's something we really need to look at. Like, does that ever get looked at in these studies? Does anyone ever sit down and say, hey, do you really think that Indigenous people in this circumstance were getting looked at by someone behind a desk and they were saying, no, I'm not going to serve that person because they're black. Like, I'm not going to do that. I cannot imagine. I'm sure there's some piece of shit nurses out there that do stuff like that, but I cannot imagine that that is so prevalent that people are doing that. Like nurses, particularly in emergency departments, yes, they're stressed and maybe you've got a bad experience with them, but fuck, they do a hard job. They do a good job. And I don't imagine that they would be looking at someone who has Indigenous heritage or is a black person or whatever and go, mate, I'm going to put that whitey over there with the big balloon fucking foot, the big diabetes. I'm going to put him in first instead of you because you have black skin. Like, I cannot see that happening. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me. And how does this affect other people who are in the hospital? How does this affect other people who are sitting there? They've been there for 2 hours and you walk in and just because you're Indigenous, you get straight in. Like, that's strange, man. Like, I think the only people who should be seen straight away who aren't emergencies are elderly people and babies, kids even. Infants. Once you're over the age of 5 and before you're fucking 80, sit down, dickhead. Like it doesn't matter about the color of your skin. Unless you're aggressive, like if you're an aggressive person, you can wait there all day, dickhead. But everybody else, sit down, wait your turn, and maybe the health department and the state government in Victoria, rather than spending all this money on fucking machete bins and these ridiculous changes to hospital admissions, maybe you should actually, I don't know, employ more nurses, employ more doctors, open up bigger emergency departments, find people who will work these jobs. If you're going to bring in so many migrants every single fucking year, find the best possible people and put them in your hospitals. Is this a one-off change? Will this change the course of admissions and triage across the country? And is that a good thing? What will these changes mean down the road? Will we see a far-right government walk in here in 20 years' time and say, well, all these Aboriginal people have been getting into hospital and getting seen first for the last 20 years. Guess what? Whitey's turn. And then they're going to flip the script on that. Okay, obviously that's probably not going to happen. But my point is, you would be pissed off if that happened. And if you're not pissed off that this is happening, then you're not fucking looking at what's really happening. I think this comes down to, on the individual level, politicians seem to want to really do good. But then when they get involved in government, they seem to be, I don't know what it is, and I don't know if they deliberately do it or not, but it seems like all they want to do is divide us further. And that is exactly what this does. It's tokenistic, it's virtue signaling, and it doesn't address the real problems. This isn't ethical. It's racist at its very core. Treating people differently because of the color of their skin is a problem. In Victoria, they've signed in the treaty with Indigenous peoples, and you will see a whole lot more of this, what can only be described as tokenistic, virtue signaling, not to use that word again, but look how woke we are, look how amazing we are, we're so sorry, all this shit. When all I think Aboriginal people need, particularly in, the big markets, the Sydneys, the Melbournes, the Brisbanes, in these big cities, they don't need this shit. They just need to be treated like everybody else and everyone just fucking move on. Admit that we've done fucked up things in the past. And when I say we, I say white people who look like me, even though it wasn't us, and move past that shit. Now, as for Aboriginal people out in the bush who still live in, I don't know if a tribal lifestyle is an offensive thing to say, but they still live in very small communities, small groups. Now, do they need intervention? Probably. But also you don't want to step in their culturally appropriate way of life. So if they want to live like that, and I mean, out in the bush, away from all infrastructure and hospitals and stuff, then that's fucking their prerogative. They're human beings. They can make these decisions for themselves. But we should provide access for these people out there, because they are Australians, to the proper healthcare, the proper environment for health and all those types of things, to allow them to live long and prosperous lives. because that's what we all want at the end of the day. Regardless of your skin color in this country, you just don't want to be treated differently. You just want to be exactly the same as everybody else. And the second that we start focusing just on skin color, shit like that, everything that we love in this country is going to continually get worse. It's not a good thing. It's a bad thing. Ladies and gentlemen, be a good motherfucker. Peace in the Middle East. My dick stinks. Toodaloo, au revoir. Bye-bye.